Today's daf is daf Chaf Beis. We are going to begin Chaf Aleph Amud Beis on the bottom. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Brisa, with regards to a Yifaste, or a beautiful captive, the Torah says V'ra'isa b'shivya, and when you see this captive, which teaches us that b'shas shivya, that this halacha only if is when she is actually a captive. What does it mean, Ashes? What does it mean, a woman? I feel Ashes ish, even if she's a married woman. Yifaste, what does it mean, a beautiful woman? The Torah is only speaking in response to the Yetzer Hara. And in other words, because she's beautiful, that's why he desired her. Now, why does the Torah permit it? Because it's preferable for a yid to eat the meat, to musas, shchutes of dying animals that were shechted, and not eat the meat of dying animals that were not shechted, but are nevelis, or carcasses. In other words, it's preferable for this act to be performed in somewhat a permitted way rather than an issudik way. What does it mean you desired her? No. Even if she's not pretty. What does it mean her? Which means her, but not her, another woman. The soldier is only allowed to take one captive in this manner. What does it mean to take her? You have the ability to take her to marry her. To you as a wife, you're not allowed to take two women. One for him and one for his father. One for him and one for his son. You shall bring her into the house. You should not pressure her to have relations during the war. In other words, you should first take her into his home. Was done in a brisa with regards to a Evet who was near to was peers. The Torah says, if the slave says, what does he say? He says, Avi, says, Sadeni, I love my Ishti, I love my master, my wife, my children, I don't want to go free. It teaches us that he does not get pierced unless he says the statements and repeats it. If he said at the beginning of the 6 years that he wants to be pierced, but he did not say this at the end of the 6 years, and in it, he is not pierced. Remember, it says, I will not go free unless he says it when he leaves. Now, if he said the statement at the end of the 6 years, but did not say this at the beginning of the 6 years, he doesn't get pierced. Now, like it says, the slave shall say, which is mashma unless he says it while he's still a slave. The Raisa says, if at the beginning of the 6 years he did say it, but he did not say it at the end of the 6 years, so he does not go free. Remember, like it says, I will not go free. My area, what do we talk about here? What does the Tana mean by saying I will not go free? Okay, let him learn out from the fact that we require another condition. Why don't you say that he has to be able to say I love my master, my wife, and my children in order to become pierced? And he cannot say this as at the start of the 6 years he did not have children from the Kanani maidservant his master provided him. So, and furthermore, Amar b'seif sheish in there. So the Brisa said, if he said his statement at the end of the 6 years, but not say at the beginning of the 6 years, also in the he's not pierced. You know, like it says, Ha'eved, the slave. Eltul seif sheish lav eved too. Is he not a slave at the end of the 6 years? Whatever says, my b'tchila sheish. What is the meaning at the beginning of the 6 years? Not referring to the actual beginning of the 6 years of service, rather, but to the beginning of the last pruta, when he reaches the start of his final stage of work with one pruta, but he's still a slave. My b'seif sheish, and what does it mean at the end of the 6 years? B'seif pruta achina, at the end of the last pruta. If the slave has wife and children, but his master does not have a wife and children, he is not pierced. Remember, like it says, because he loves you and your house. Now, the word house is referring to a wife and children. Therefore, if the master does not have a wife and children, the pasuk cannot be fulfilled. So therefore, the slave is not pierced. If his master has a wife and children, but he does not have a wife and children, also in the he is not pierced. And like it says, he says, I love my master, my wife, and my children. Furthermore, if he loves his master does not love him, and it also doesn't get pierced. And like it says, because he fears well with you, which is mashma that is good for both of them to be with each other. Like it says, sorry, so I skipped. If his master loves him, but he doesn't love his master. And it's also he doesn't get pierced. It says, because he loves you. If he is ill and his master is not ill, and yes, he's not pierced. It says, because he loves you. If his master is ill and he's not ill, and he also doesn't get pierced, it says, so Rabbi Barbai asked the Shaila, what if both of them are ill? What's the halacha? Do we require that the slave is to be with you in the same condition as the master? And it is. Or do we say that perhaps because he fears well with you, it must be good for both of them, and it's not. So where it says Teiko, it's Taka the Shaila. What does it mean? Because he fears well with you, which teaches us that that teaches us that the slave should be with you. He has to be treated equal in food. He has to eat and drink the same quality that you drink. Not that you're eating fine bread and he eats inferior bread from coarse flour mixed with bran, which is a low quality. Or you're drinking aged wine, he drinks inferior wine. Or situation where you sleep comfortably on a nice soft sheet and he sleeps in straw. Anybody who purchases a Hebrew slave is like he acquires a master for himself, because he must be careful that the slave's living conditions are equal to his own. What does it mean with regards to the passage that deals with the freedom of a slave? It says, then he shall go out from you, he and his children with him. Says, if he is sold, are sons and daughters sold? Here we learn that the master is obligated to provide sustenance for his children. When the slave is free, his sons are released as well. Gates about the Emer, you find similarly in Bal Isha Hu B'Yatzu Ishta Imay, it says if he's married, then his wife shall go out with him. If he is sold, is his wife sold? It teaches us that his master is obligated to provide mezainis, sustenance for his wife. What's the Gemara says is necessary for the brayso to mention both cases. If it would only teach me the case of the master, if it would only teach me that the master is required to provide sustenance to the slave's children, so you would say you would say that because they're not fit to work and heat, since they're not able to support themselves, the master is required to support them. In the case of his wife, the bas mechel, one can eat and work. One would say that might say that she should work and eat in payment for her work, and the master is not required to support her for free. Now, Yashmin and Ishta, and if the Torah will only tell me his wife, since it's not her manner to circulate. She's too embarrassed to do so. In regards to the children, since it's their manner to circulate and beg, so in other words, it's not beneath their dignity. So Emalei, you would say that he's not required to support them. They're afraid to teach me both. You never asked about Delas. If the Torah would only say his ears to the door, you say you to pay the connected us them at Delas. You would say that he should pierce his ear to the door. You would say he should pierce opposite his ear into the door alone. He'd connected us them at Delas in Aznilei, which is mashma into the door. Yes, it should be pierced, but his ears itself, no, it should not be pierced. The Gemara says, but not the Eizan. This is clearly the ear. Ella, rather, I would say that the master should pierce his ear outside, not at the door, and he should place it afterwards at the door. And he should pierce opposite to his ear at the door. That's what the pasuk says. But that's what it says. Through his ear into his door. He pours through his ear until he reaches the door. Now, he says, what does it mean, Delas? What does it mean, door? Shemeani, I would derive that Beinat Kura means Shinat Kura. Whether it's detached from the doorpost, whether it's not detached from the door. So Tamlim or Mezuzah. Mezuzah Aimid, Ma'umah, just as the doorpost is upright and attached. After so to the door must be upright and attached to the doorpost. The Eichlan Mazake would expand the pasuk in a decorative way. Why is the ear different from all the other limbs, as the ear alone is pierced? So he says that the Eibishter says that this person who heard my voice on Har Sinai saying that for me the children of Israel are slaves, they should not be slaves to slaves, and yet this man went and willingly acquired a master for himself, therefore let him be pierced. You say, why are the door and the doorpost different from all of the objects of the house that the piercings were performed with them? So the door and the doorpost were written in Mitzrayim, were witnesses in Mitzrayim when I passed over the lintel and over the doorpost. And this guy went and he acquired a master for himself. Let him be pierced before them as they are witnesses. He was violated what the Teda said. Okay, I want to start a brand new Mishnah. The Mishnah says as follows. It's talking about the Mishnah, Eved Kanani Nikna Bekesef Ubeshtar B'Chazakim. Eved Kanani, a Kanani slave, is acquired by means of money, by means of a document, and by means of a chazakah. And he can acquire himself as freedom by means of money given by others. Other people can give money for his master. And by means of a get, if he accepts it by himself. These are the words of Meir. Because of the he says that the slave can be freed by means of money given by himself and by means of a get if he accepted it by others, provided that the money provided it belongs to others. This is because the slave cannot possess property, as we know, Gemara says, from where do we know that these modes by this that the Eved can be acquired? The Ksiv that it says, and you shall bequeath them to your children as a inheritance. The Teda juxtaposes the Eved to the Steachuzah, Mas Steachuzah Nigdam Kesef. It could be the Kesef Shtar Chazaka. Kanani, Nigdam Kesef Shtar Chazaka. Depending on if just as the Steachuzah Chazers the Balaam after the Kanani Chazers the Balaam, let them by him Tavedu. Which is much of the sale is permanent. We learned in our Bryce so that if Eved Kanani to after Khalifin, that the Eved Kanani can be acquired by means of exchange. The Chalipit, the Tana Didan, what is our Tana or Mishnah mention through this? So Milsa the lesson on top of Ktani, because he's teaching the effectiveness of modes which are not effective in transforming the ownership of Metalton. Milsa the day, so Metalton like Ktani, but things which are Metalton he didn't teach. Amr Shmuel says, Eved Kanani can be Mashiach, and Eved Kanani can be acquired by means of pulling. If the master took him by force and the slave came to him, Kanai is acquired. Koro Ba'atzlei. If the master called and came to him willingly, then like Kanai is not acquired. So the Gemara says, Mela, according to our Tana, our Mishnah is clear why he did not list the modes of Kinyan, as he did not teach the effectiveness of modes of acquisition that are effective in transforming the ownership of movable property. The lesson taught in Tani, Tana, Boda, listed Mashiach. But according to the opinion of the Tana, the Brisa, who taught this Chalip and let him teach also about Mashiach. So the more answers it says, that he's teaching the effective modes of acquisition that are effective in transforming the ownership of both land and movable property. But he did not teach the effectiveness of Mashiach, which is effective in transforming the ownership of movable property, but not effective in transforming the ownership of land. So the Gemara now returns to analyze Shmuel's statement. Kate said, how does one require a slave through Mashiach? If the master took him by force and he came to him, he is acquired. If he called him and he came to him, he is not required. So Maratzu Kro Loi, and if he and has he not acquired him? If he called him, but we learned how is the animal acquired through passing. If he grabbed it on its hoof, or its hair, or its saddle on it, or the load on it, or by a bit in its mouth, or by the bell of his neck, he is acquired. How is the Mashiach done? If he calls it and it comes to it, or if he hits with a stick and it runs before him, once he lifts his foreleg and hand They were standing, he acquired it. To be asked until he walks the distance of his full height in the presence of the one acquiring it. In any event, this is mashma that calling is effective use of mode of pulling. So Amri, they say in response to this, an animal walks by the will of its owner. So it comes when it's called as though it is being pulled. But a slave walks on his own will. So even if his slave comes when he's called, this cannot be considered acquisition through pulling, as the master has performed no acquisition at all. A slave who was a minor is considered like an animal. Since he has no will of his own, he can be acquired through calling like an animal. How is a slave through possession? If the slave removes his master's shoe, or he carries his garments after him in the bathhouse, or he undresses him, or he bathes him, anoints him, scrubs the oil off of him, dresses him, or puts his shoes or lifts him, he can know the master acquires it. Shimon says that acquisition through the mode of possession should not be considered greater than the acquisition using the mode of lifting, as lifting acquires property in any situation. Where it says Maikom, or what does Shimon mean? The first time also said a slave can be acquired by lifting. So Rashi says the same. If a slave lifts his master, then the master acquires him as he's performing. But if his master lifts the slave, then the master is not acquired. Possession should not be greater than the acquisition through lifting. Because Akbos can all places. So where it says Hasha the Amris, now that you said now that you said that if a slave lifts his master, the master acquired him. So Alamata Shufka Shufka should be kind of with Bia. As if it's possible to claim she lifts him during the act of Bia. When we say this, one is being Nena, one is being Mistar. But in the case of Bia, Zanena, it's the master benefits, that is the Shufka Kananis likewise benefits. So since both sides derive benefit, cannot be seen as an act of keening. What does it mean if he has relations with her in a typical manner? What can be said? In that case, the woman does not benefit from the bia. So he says, who tells you that there's no benefit for both of them? There's benefit only for the men when they engage. Right? It says lying with the woman. It teaches us that it's Kedarka Shalekadaka. Buddha from India was a convert who had no Yershim. Cholash, when he became ill, Marzusha entered to ask about his health. When he saw his condition intensified, but he's about to die, so Marzusha said to him, so he said to the slave, remove my shoes and take them to my house. He wanted to acquire the slave upon the death of his master, as when a convert dies without any Yershim, the first person to claim the property acquires it. Or says there are those who say that the slave was an adult man. Said Perish the Misha, and this person from India that died. Said Perish the Chaim, and Marzusha departed by life by receiving the slave. And those who say that the slave was a minor. But the Lake Abashol, Marzusha did not go in accordance to the Abashol. The tiny Ger Shemeis is Shon the Chosam. He taught with regards to a Ger who died without any Yershim and he didn't plunder his property. According to a minor slaves, anyone who takes possession of the minor acquires them. According to the opinion of Rabbi Shalom, Marzusha did not have to hasten to acquire the slave during his lifetime, or for the slave would acquire him, he should have waited until he died before acquiring the slave.